My SIL's evil plan to poison me at my husband's barbecue backfired. She ended up in jail and divorced. Hey everyone, I'm Lizzie, a 22-year-old from a small town in Ohio, and I've got a wild story that still gives me chills. I've been married to my husband Ethan for 5 years now, and we've been through a lot together mostly because of his sister Madison. Let me set the scene. It's a sunny Saturday afternoon in late August, and we're hosting a big family BBQ at our house to celebrate Ethan's 27th birthday. Our backyard is buzzing with people, string lights are hung up. The grill is sizzling with burgers and hot dogs, and there's a playlist of classic rock tunes playing through Ethan's old Bluetooth speaker. The smell of charcoal and freshly cut grass fills the air, and I'm feeling on top of the world because we just announced my pregnancy to the family a week ago. I'm 5 months along, wearing a flowy sundress that shows off my little bump, and I can't stop smiling as I sip on a mocktail sparkling water with a splash of cranberry juice. Ethan's flipping burgers at the grill, his dark hair messy from the heat, and he keeps shooting me these goofy grins that make my heart melt. "Babe, you want another hot dog?" he calls out, waving a spatula like he's conducting an orchestra. I laugh and shake my head, rubbing my belly. "I'm good, but this little guy might want one later." The backyard is packed with family. Ethan's mom, Linda, a sweet 55-year-old with a perm and a knack for baking, is setting out her famous potato salad on the picnic table. His dad, Greg, a gruff 58-year-old retired mechanic, is cracking open a beer and arguing with Ethan's Uncle Tom about the best way to grill ribs. Uncle Tom, 62, is the family jokester, always wearing a loud Hawaiian shirt and telling stories that make everyone groan. Then there's Ethan's little cousin, 10-year-old Mia, running around with a water gun, giggling as she sprays anyone who gets too close. My best friend Sarah, a 23-year-old barista with a nose ring and a sarcastic sense of humor, is here too, helping me set up the dessert table. "Lizzie, you're glowing," she says, nudging me with a grin. "Pregnancy looks good on you." But not everyone's in a celebratory mood. Madison, Ethan's 29-year-old sister, has been a thorn in my side since the day I met her. She's tall, with sharp features, and a fake smile that never reaches her eyes. She'd bring up Ethan's exes at every family gathering, criticize my cooking, my clothes, even the way I laugh saying it's too loud for a proper lady. The worst was at our wedding 3 years ago when she showed up late, threw a tantrum about the seating chart, and accidentally spilled red wine on my dress during the reception. I've tried to keep the peace for Ethan's sake, but it's been a constant battle. So when Madison showed up uninvited to the BBQ, I was on edge. She walked in with her husband Ryan, a quiet 30-year-old accountant who always looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. Madison was all smiles. Carrying a tray of cupcakes she claimed to have baked herself. "Lizzie, Ethan, I'm so sorry for how I've been," she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "I've been going to therapy, and I realize I've been awful. I just want to make things right, especially now that you're starting a family." She even hugged me, which felt like being hugged by a snake. Ethan bought it. Of course, he's always been too forgiving when it comes to his sister. "See, babe, I told you she'd come around," he whispered, squeezing my hand. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But something about the way her eyes darted around, like she was looking for an audience, made my stomach churn. Sarah noticed it too. "She's up to something," she muttered, popping a grape into her mouth as we watched Madison chat up Ethan's Aunt Clara, a nosy 60-year-old who loves gossip more than her famous pecan pie. "I don't trust her, Lizzie. Be careful." I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. After all, I was pregnant, surrounded by family, and it was Ethan's birthday. What could go wrong? But as the afternoon went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Madison's change of heart was just the beginning of something much worse. I tried to shake off Sarah's warning, but it clung to me like the sticky August heat. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the backyard was alive with the kind of chaotic joy only a family BBQ can bring. Ethan had switched the playlist to some old Eagles tunes. Hotel California was playing now, the guitar riffs floating through the air. Uncle Tom, never one to miss a chance to be the center of attention, grabbed a plastic fork and started playing air guitar, his Hawaiian shirt flapping as he spun around. Linda laughed so hard she nearly spilled the tray of lemonade she was carrying, the ice clinking softly in the glasses. "Tom, you're gonna throw your back out," she teased, her voice warm with affection. Mia and her friend Jake, a freckled 11-year-old with a gap-toothed grin, had abandoned their water guns and were now playing a game of tag, darting between the adults with shrieks of laughter. Greg was still by the grill, sipping his beer and grumbling to Aunt Clara about how pineapple on pizza was a crime against humanity. Clara, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, just smirked and popped a cherry tomato into her mouth. "You're too old to be this dramatic, Greg," she shot back, her tone dripping with the kind of sass only a 60-year-old gossip queen could pull off. I was trying to focus on the moment and the smell of grilled burgers, the feel of the grass under my sandals, the way Ethan's laugh carried over the music, but Madison was like a dark cloud I couldn't ignore. She'd been hovering near the dessert table for a while now, rearranging the cupcakes she brought and chatting with anyone who'd listen. Her husband Ryan was keeping his distance, leaning against the fence with a beer in hand. He looked miserable, his shoulders slumped, his eyes darting toward Madison every few seconds like he was waiting for her to do something. I walked over to grab a napkin from the table near him, trying to be casual. "You okay, Ryan?" I asked, keeping my voice light. He glanced at me, his jaw tight, and gave a small nod. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said, but his voice was strained. He took a long sip of his beer, his eyes flickering to Madison again. "She's just... you know how she gets at these things." I nodded, not wanting to push him, but his words only deepened the knot in my stomach. Ryan had always been the quiet one, the kind of guy who'd rather fade into the background than deal with Madison's drama. Seeing him so on edge made me wonder what he wasn't saying. And then Madison made her move. She walked over to me, her heels clicking on the patio stones, a bright smile plastered on her face. In her hands was a small plate with a slice of what looked like a pecan pie baronne of my favorite desserts. My mouth watered just looking at it, the golden crust glistening with caramelized sugar. "Lizzie, I made these especially for you," she said, her voice so sweet it almost sounded genuine. "I know how much you love pecan pie, and I wanted to do something nice to celebrate the baby." She held the plate out to me, her eyes locked on mine, unblinking like she was waiting for something. I froze, my fingers hovering over the plate. Everyone was watching us now. Ethan had turned away from the grill, a spatula still in his hand, and Linda was smiling at us from the picnic table, her hands clasped together like she was witnessing some heartfelt moment. Even Aunt Clara had stopped her debate with Greg to eavesdrop, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. I didn't want to seem ungrateful, especially after Madison's big apology earlier. "Thanks, Madison," I said, forcing a smile as I took the plate. But as I looked down at the dessert, my heart stopped. There, mixed into the pecan topping, were tiny chunks of walnuts. My throat tightened, and my hands started to tremble. I'm severely allergic to walnuts, something Madison knew. 2 years ago, she'd been at our house for a game night when I accidentally ate a cookie with walnut pieces. I'd gone into anaphylactic shock, my throat swelling so fast I could barely breathe. Ethan had to jab me with my EpiPen while Sarah called 911, and I spent the night in the ER, hooked up to an IV. Madison had been there the whole time, and when I got home the next day, she'd made a snarky comment about how I was overreacting for attention. She knew exactly what walnuts did to me. I looked up at her, my voice barely above a whisper. Her smile didn't falter, not even for a second. "Oh, does it?" she said, tilting her head like she was genuinely surprised. "I must have mixed up the recipe. I'm so sorry, Lizzie." But there was something in her eyes, a cold, calculating glint, that made my blood run cold. She wasn't sorry. She was watching me, waiting for me to take a bite. I couldn't eat it. I couldn't risk it, not with my baby depending on me. Ryan had just walked over, still holding his beer, and I thrust the plate into his hands, trying to keep my voice steady. "Here, you can have it," I said, forcing a laugh. "I'll grab something else." Ryan shrugged, clearly oblivious to the tension, and took a big bite. "Thanks, Liz," he said, chewing. "Tastes fine to me." But as I watched him eat, a sinking feeling settled in my chest. Something was very, very wrong. If this story is shocking you as much as it shocked me, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what would you do if someone tried to poison you at a family party. Sarah grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the dessert table, her grip tight. "Lizzie, that was no accident," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "She knew exactly what she was doing. I saw the way she looked at you. She wanted you to eat that." I wanted to argue, to tell her I was being paranoid, but the memory of Madison's smirk flashed in my mind. My hands were still trembling as I set the plate down, my mocktail suddenly tasting sour in my mouth. I glanced back at Madison, who was now chatting with Aunt Clara again, her laugh loud and fake. She didn't even look worried, and that scared me more than anything. The next few minutes felt like a blur, but they also stretched out like an eternity. I was standing by the dessert table with Sarah, trying to calm my racing heart, when I heard a deep, hacking sound that cut through the music. I turned around just in time to see Ryan, who'd been standing near the grill with Ethan, double over. His face was flushed red, then turned ghostly pale in a matter of seconds. He clutched his stomach, his beer slipping from his hand and spilling onto the grass. I don't feel so good," he gasped, his voice hoarse. He dropped to his knees, and then he started vomiting violently, right there in the middle of the backyard. The party came to a screeching halt. Linda let out a scream, her tray of lemonade slipping from her hands and crashing onto the patio, the glass shattering into a million pieces. The sharp sound made Mia and Jake freeze mid-run, their laughter dying in their throats. Mia's eyes widened, and she grabbed Jake's hand, her little voice trembling. "What's wrong with Uncle Ryan?" she asked, looking up at Uncle Tom for answers. Tom, for once, didn't have a joke ready. He knelt down, pulling both kids into a hug to shield them from the scene. "It's okay, sweetie," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Let's go inside for a bit, okay? We'll get some ice cream." He led them toward the house, but I could see the worry etched into his face. Ethan was at Ryan's side in an instant, dropping the spatula he'd been holding. "Ryan, hey, talk to me, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice tight with panic. Ryan tried to answer, but all that came out was another choked gasp. His eyes were glassy, and sweat was beading on his forehead. Greg and Aunt Clara rushed over, Greg kneeling beside Ryan to help him sit up. "Breathe, son, just breathe," Greg said, his gruff voice steady but laced with fear. Aunt Clara fanned Ryan with a paper plate, her hands shaking. "He looks bad, Greg," she whispered, her usual gossip-loving demeanor replaced with genuine concern. Sarah was already on her phone, dialing 911. I could hear her voice, calm but urgent, as she spoke to the dispatcher. "Yes, we need an ambulance at 142 Maple Drive. My friend's brother-in-law is having a severe reaction. He ate something, and now he's vomiting. He's barely conscious. Please hurry!" She glanced at me, her eyes wide with fear, and I knew she was thinking the same thing I was, that dessert wasn't just a mistake. I looked around the backyard, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Everyone was focused on Ryan, everyone except Madison. She was standing off to the side, near the picnic table, her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't look worried or scared. She looked annoyed. When Linda turned to her, tears streaming down her face, and asked, "Madison, what's happening to him?" Madison just rolled her eyes. "He's fine, Mom," she snapped, her tone sharp. "He probably just drank too much. You know how he gets." But Ryan hadn't even finished his first beer. I'd seen him nursing it all afternoon. This wasn't alcohol. This was something else. I grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him away from Ryan for just a second. My voice was trembling as I spoke, barely above a whisper. "Ethan, that dessert, Madison gave it to me. It had walnuts in it. She knew I'm allergic." His face went pale, and I saw a flash of something I'd never seen in him before. Pure, unfiltered anger. He looked over at his sister, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "Are you serious, Lizzie?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. She knew, Ethan. She knew what it would do to me. Before he could respond, Ryan let out a choked gasp, and his body went limp. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed completely, his head hitting the grass with a dull thud. Linda let out a sob, dropping to her knees beside him. "He's not breathing!" she cried, her hands hovering over him like she didn't know what to do. Greg started chest compressions, his movements steady but frantic. "Come on, Ryan, stay with us," he muttered, his voice breaking. I felt like I was going to be sick not from the pregnancy, but from the sheer terror of what was happening. All I could think about was that dessert, and the fact that it was meant for me. The sound of sirens in the distance broke through the chaos, and I let out a shaky breath. Help was coming. But as I looked at Madison, still standing there with that cold, detached expression, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The paramedics arrived just as the last light of the sunset faded, their red and blue lights casting eerie shadows across the backyard. They moved quickly, their boots crunching on the grass as they rushed to Ryan's side. One of them, a young woman with a tight ponytail, knelt beside him, checking his pulse while her partner set up an oxygen mask. "We've got a pulse, but it's weak," she said, her voice calm but urgent. They loaded Ryan onto a stretcher, hooking him up to an IV as they moved him to the ambulance. Linda was a mess, her hands pressed to her mouth as she watched them take her son away. "I'm coming with you," she said, her voice trembling, and climbed into the ambulance with them. Greg followed in his truck, his face grim. Ethan and I jumped into our car to follow, my hands still shaking as I buckled my seatbelt. I kept replaying the moment Madison handed me that plate, her fake smile burned into my memory. "She did this, Ethan," I said, my voice breaking as we sped down the quiet streets of our neighborhood. "She tried to hurt me and our baby." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I know," he said, his voice low and raw. "I can't believe I let her into our house after everything she's done. This is on me, Lizzie." I reached over and squeezed his hand, tears streaming down my face. "It's not your fault," I whispered. "She's the one who did this." Madison had stayed behind at the house, claiming she needed to clean up the backyard. But I knew better. She was avoiding the hospital because she knew what was coming. Sarah stayed too, texting me as we drove. "I'm keeping an eye on her," she wrote. "She's acting way too calm. I don't trust her. She might try to run." I texted back, my fingers trembling. "Don't let her out of your sight." At the hospital, we sat in the waiting room for what felt like hours, the sterile smell of antiseptic making my stomach churn. Linda was pacing back and forth, her hands wringing together, while Greg sat in a chair with his head in his hands. Ethan kept his arm around me, his thumb rubbing small circles on my shoulder, but I could feel the tension in his body. Finally, a doctor came out to update us. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, but her expression was serious. "He's stable," she said, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But it wasn't just an allergic reaction. We found traces of a toxic substance in his system, something that could have been fatal if he'd eaten more. "We've called the police to investigate." My stomach dropped, and I felt Ethan's arm tighten around me. A toxic substance? This wasn't just about my allergy. Madison had tried to poison me. I looked at Ethan, and I could see the same realization dawning on him. His face hardened, and he stood up, pulling out his phone. "We have security cameras in the backyard," he said, his voice steady but filled with rage. "I'm sending the footage to the police right now." The footage was damning. We watched it later with the officers at the hospital, and it was like something out of a nightmare. There was Madison, clear as day, picking out the pecan pie bar with walnuts from the tray. She even glanced at the camera for a split second, like she knew it was there but didn't care. The officers didn't hesitate, they drove straight to our house and arrested her on the spot. Sarah told me later that Madison tried to play the victim, crying and claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But when they showed her the footage, she broke down and confessed. She'd been jealous of me since the day Ethan and I got engaged, and my pregnancy announcement pushed her over the edge. She admitted to lacing the dessert with a toxic cleaning chemical she'd found in our garage, hoping it would make me sick enough to miscarry or worse. She didn't expect me to notice the walnuts and pass the plate to Ryan. Her plan had backfired in the worst way possible, and now she was facing the consequences. Ryan, still in the hospital recovering, was devastated when he heard the truth. He'd always been the quiet, supportive one in their marriage, putting up with Madison's drama for years. But this was too much. "I can't believe I married someone who'd do this," he told Ethan when we visited him the next day. His voice was weak, but his eyes were filled with a mix of anger and betrayal. He pressed charges against Madison for attempted poisoning and filed for divorce within days. The rest of the family cut her off completely. Linda refused to even say her name, and Greg told Ethan he was done with her for good. Last I heard, Madison was still in jail, awaiting trial on charges of attempted assault and reckless endangerment. As for me and Ethan, we tried to move forward. A few months later, we welcomed our son, Oliver, a healthy, beautiful baby boy with Ethan's dark hair and my hazel eyes. I'll never forget the moment I held him for the first time, his tiny hand wrapping around my finger as he let out a soft coo. It was like all the fear and pain of that day melted away, replaced by a love so fierce it took my breath away. We've since moved to a new house, a cozy little place in a different town, far away from the memories of that BBQ. We've surrounded ourselves with the family who truly supports us. Sarah, who's now Oliver's godmother and brings him silly stuffed animals every time she visits, and Linda, who spoils him with homemade cookies and knitted blankets. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and Oliver is asleep in his crib, I think about Madison. I think about the look in her eyes when she handed me that plate, the way she smiled like she'd already won. I wonder how far she would have gone if I hadn't noticed the walnuts, if Ryan hadn't taken that bite instead of me. It's a thought that keeps me up at night, a reminder of how close I came to losing everything. If you enjoyed this crazy story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more Reddit tales. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. I can't wait to hear your thoughts.